Hey guys, so today we are talking about the Romantic era. I have Berlioz here with me today, who also feels he needs to talk to you about Romantic composers, because he is named after two of them. Right, Berlioz Alvis Mahler? Yes. I can't. Okay, so if he interrupts, I'm sorry. So the Romantic era is probably my favorite era of music. There's so many different things that happen in the Romantic era that we can actually split it up into early Romantic era and late Romantic era. But overall, the whole thing stretches from about 1800 to 1910, so about 110 years. It sits right in between the classical era and modern eras, which we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. The Romantic era was part of kind of a larger societal change, just overall with all art. Things started really to focus on nature and literature and poetry rather than the kind of strict rules of the classical era. Many composers felt that after Beethoven, who was kind of at the beginning of the Romantic era, end of the classical era, he kind of exhausted and just used up all of the forms from the classical era, all of those kind of ways of structuring things. He just did them in a way that nobody could really top. And so we started having other forms become a lot more popular in the Romantic era. Things like etudes and nocturnes, rhapsodies, those all became a lot more popular in the Romantic era. So again, we're seeing a lot of variation in the kind of music we can have. The Romantic era, I think, is really characterized by the bending and breaking of rules about what kind of notes can work together. Romantic composers really started saying these rules are great and they do help us write, pleasing music, but they shouldn't be rules. They should be guidelines. And so they starting to shy away from it. It was kind of awesome. It's what makes the Romantic era one of my favorites. We know in the classical era that the melody became more important, but melodies were typically kind of short and then they would get repeated and changed over and over. In the Romantic era, we start to see a lot longer melodies, a lot longer phrases to paint more complex pictures. So I just think that's kind of interesting. In general, in the Romantic era, they start to push things to the extremes. So, whatever the highest and lowest notes of certain instruments are, they start to get used a lot more. They were kind of like considered no-no zones during the classical era, and the Romantic composers were like, we're going to do it anyway. Same thing with really extreme dynamics. So things being really, really loud or really quiet, those started to get used more in the Romantic era as well. So some early Romantic composers are some that we've talked about during Composer of the Week. People like Beethoven, Schubert, Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn, and then people like Puccini, Verdi, Bizet, Saint-Saëns, and Fauré. Oh, no, I'm sorry, said that wrong. Early Romantic composers would be Beethoven, Schubert, Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn, Rossini, Clara and Robert Schumann, Chopin, and Berlioz. So all those composers we've talked about during our COVID-19 closure. Late Romantic composers we've just started to talk about. They include Liszt, Strauss, Wagner, also Brahms, Mahler, Tchaikovsky, Puccini, Verdi, Berlioz, Saint-Saëns, and Fauré. So just a huge range of music that we have here. For your romantic music example, I could have chosen so many different things because again there's a huge variation about what happens in the Romantic era, but I chose Schubert's An der Musik, which is there's a great introduction by the accompanist, so I'll let him explain it, but I just thought it was a good example because it's about music itself. And before the Romantic era, people didn't really want to write music about music. But the Romantic era, they said, no, we need to talk about this more. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll talk tomorrow about the modern and contemporary eras. Bye.